Hey you guys, welcome to the channel. Now a few weeks ago I made a video about how to get into RC car racing on a budget, and then about a week ago I made a video showing you all about this budget RC car, which is a vintage Schumacher Mission chassis which I put together myself, and I took it out a couple of weeks ago and it actually ran pretty well. Now in the last video I said I'm going to make a video about setting the car up properly, as the first time out was a bit of a fact-finding mission. So today we're going to set this car up so next time out it drives a little better and I can look to maybe progress up the field and maybe not finish second to last again. So first thing to do when you're setting up a race car is to think what you actually want to get out of setting it up. Well, from last time out I know I want this to be a little bit quicker. So nothing major, you know, this is only running a brushed motor, but there were two other cars there running the same brushed motor as me and they were just a little bit quicker than me down the straights. Not a lot quicker, but a little bit quicker. So we want to improve the top speed, definitely. The other thing I really want to improve is the grip on the rear end of the car, because anytime I let off the throttle or hit the brakes and I was near a corner, it would just slide out. So in the end, I was kind of letting off the throttle before I turned and steering in smoothly, and that was the only way I was getting around the track without spinning. So we want to adjust those things today. So what are we going to adjust? Now before I adjust any of those things, I've got to address the elephant in the room, and that's this big gaping hole here where there should be a wheel. This wheel, to be precise, where the hub just completely disintegrated. So I've got a choice of a few today. Basically at the club after that happened, someone came and saw me and said they've got some used wheels and tyres I can have. So I've got a choice of these Schumacher tyres or these Schumacher tyres. Now I've had a look and a feel at both sets and they seem about the same with about the same amount of wear, so I'm just going to guess and put a set of these on and we can crack on with the rest of the video. So that looks better now with all four wheels and tyres on. So now we're on to step 2, which is going to be replacing this pinion gear with a different pinion gear. Now when I bought this RC, it was old, it had no motor, it had a spare gear but it wasn't in good shape, so I replaced it with an 83 tooth, I think it is. And I had no idea what pinion gear to put on there, so I was chatting to a guy from the club and we decided between a 24 and a 26. So I had a 22 and a 24 tooth and I ordered a 26 tooth. So I put the 24 tooth on for the first night out and it was actually surprisingly nippy. For a brush motor, I thought it went pretty well, but again, like I said earlier, there were people out that night also with the same motor running quicker than me, so that's going to have to go and we're going to have to fit this here 26 tooth pinion gear. So let's get cracking. So we put some fresh tyres on and we have changed the pinion gear. So now we've got all four tyres, we've got a bit more top speed. Let's get on to the rear grip. Now there's a few ways you can improve rear grip. One of those ways is by removing some front end grip, which we're not going to do today. Second way is to soften the rear suspension. Now while I was out on the first run out, I did have a quick go at softening the rear suspension, but we can have a little bit more play around with that today. The other thing you can do is increase the negative camber on the rear. So basically, when your wheels turn in this way, there's a little bit more grip. Obviously you don't want to go too far, but just a little bit. There's already a tiny amount of negative camber on the rear, but nothing much. We could probably go up a degree. And I've had to buy a few things in order to be able to do this. So for a starter, I purchased this camber gauge, and you kind of put that against the rear wheel and see how many degrees you've got. And the other thing I bought is one of these Fast Tracks turnbuckle adjusters. And these are really cheap bits, these are about £5 each, these things. But I've just realised sitting here that most of these turnbuckles actually don't require one of these. They actually would require something sharp going through there to turn them. So that was a waste of that's a waste of time and money, wasn't it? Never mind. Now the final thing you can do to improve rear grip, and front grip as well if you want to do it to the front, but on the rear, is loosen off the differentials. Because as you can see, on the rear of the car, the differential is relatively stiff. It's not stiff, it's nowhere near being a fixed unit, but it is a little bit stiff, whereas the diff on the front of the car, silky smooth, look at that. So probably what's happening here is the front end's gripping a little bit too much, and the rear end's not gripping enough. So if we get a chance in this video, I'll have a look at the rear diff, but to begin with I want to look at the shock absorbers and I want to look at the camber as well. So I'm going to crack on with them now. Now the shock absorbers on this car are quite an old style shock absorber because it is an old style RC car. And you have these little preload adjusters at the top here, and the more of them you have, the harder the suspension or stiffer the suspension is. So we're going to remove a few of them today, probably this big one at the top. And then at the front, we're going to leave the front as is. It's got quite a big chunky preload spacer there and two small ones as well. So we're going to leave those at the front and remove this big one at the rear. Now these are really easy to remove. All you've got to do is kind of get them so you can get that piece there. Get some long nose pliers on the go. Try not to knock my camera over here. And just pull it out. And it's that easy. So we'll do the other side as well. But I can't lose these though, because I haven't got many of these spare, I don't think. So again, kind of pop it round. That's not the one we want, is it? No. This is the one we want. Pop it out. And that'll make suspension softer. So that's one job done. So after softening the rear suspension before, I realised that actually this is running pretty much on the floor. So I found these springs lying around in a box of spares, I fitted them on, and I've actually made the rear end a bit stiffer, to be honest with you. But at least now it's not riding the chassis on the floor, which has got to be an improvement. Effectively how this works is you line this part here on the bottom of the work surface, and you move this over, and it shows your camber angle, which is almost on 0 degrees. So we're going to work on putting some more negative camber, so putting the wheel that way, and hopefully that'll give us a bit more grip. Now I'm not going to do much, I'm going to increase it by about 1 degree, because you don't want to be making loads of big changes all at once. Let's make a few small changes, and then after the next race meeting I can make some more changes. Right, so what it turns out had happened was, this side here wasn't around 1 degree and I couldn't pull it in any further. That's as far as it would go. But this side here was actually on 0 degrees and I couldn't pull it in any further. Now that does explain the understeer I was getting coming out of a right hand turn. Because if that was on 0 degrees and that was on 1 degrees, then that side was definitely going to be a lot slippier on the rear end. So what I've done is I've moved, that way you can see this, under there, the little pivot ball joint, and it used to be in that hole, and now I've moved it over to that hole and extended these on both sides. So all I'm going to do now is extend the top links until I get to around 1 degree each side. This one's on about 2 degrees, this one's on about 4 degrees negative camber at the moment, which is way too much. So I'll get cracking on with this now. So now I've adjusted it some more, let's try again with the camber gauge. So we've got to turn it round to do the other side. And I'm going to push my camera up a little bit if it'll go. Zoom in a little bit. Wherever my hand goes, it's blocking the light. That's on around 1 degree, so I've gone a bit too far on that one, so we'll try again. Want it to be around 1.5 maybe. Okay, so both sides of the car are on around about 1.5 degrees negative camber on the rear. So that's definitely got to make an improvement in the handling, as this side was on about 0 and this side was on about 1. So 1.5 degrees on each side will give us just a little bit extra grip on the rear end of the car, which is desperately needed. So that's happy days. So while we're using this gauge, we're going to look at as well the front camber, see what kind of levels, what kind of angles they're at. And we're also going to look at the ride height as well, as this little tool here has a little ride height gauge as well, which could come in fairly handy. And I think really, realistically, it should be pretty level as a racing car. However, I think the front end of this car is a little bit higher than the rear, so I might adjust that today as well. So, just like when I bought my full-size car and the tyre pressures were all over the shop, with this little beauty, the camber was all over the shop. So we had 1 degree camber on the right side rear, we had 0 degree camber on the left side rear, we had half a degree camber on the left side front, and we had no camber at all on the right side front. But now we have a nice healthy 1.5 degree negative camber on both rear tyres, and a nice healthy half degree camber on both the front tyres. So that's a really big improvement. On top of that, we've got our 26 tooth pinion fitted and some nice new wheels and tyres. I was going to go into the rear diff, but honestly I've run out of time. This has taken longer than I thought it would, like everything does in my life, unfortunately. So I've also adjusted the rear suspension. Although I set out to soften the rear suspension, it turned out the rear of the car was basically dragging on the floor. So I've actually ended up stiffening the rear suspension, which is a little bit disappointing. But at least now, when I'm making a corner, these rear tyres are going to be getting some really good grip, which is excellent news. The final thing we're going to do now is check the ride height of the car, which again, using this cheap tool I bought off eBay. And it's got little increments here. The lighting is terrible here. So 3mm, 4mm, 5mm, 6mm, 7mm. Now, I don't want to be kind of dragging on the floor. So, I don't know what a good ride height is, to be honest with you. But ideally, I'm looking for kind of similar ride height front and rear is more what I'm concerned with more than anything else. So, we'll start at the front here. That's even higher than the highest. That's about 1 centimetre off the deck. And at the back, what are we running? Get anywhere decent to fit it in. Again, higher than the gauge will actually allow. So as the ride height is actually higher than this high smart here, what I'm going to do instead is find something that will just about fit under either end and then compare the difference in ride height. So this is, I got this with an MST drift car years ago, and this was like the wheel nut for it, because just like this is a lot of Imperial sockets on an MST drift car. So send this in the packaging. Now this just about glides under the front end, but will not drag along to the rear of the car. So that tells me that tells me the rear of the car is sitting lower than the front, and I thought this anyway, to be honest. However, here we are. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to make this suspension any stiffer on the back. It's stiff enough as it is. I don't really want to soften the front suspension to bring the front down, as I'm trying to not get too much grip on the front and trying to get as much grip on the back as I can. So in order to sort out the ride height on this car and make it even, so that that fits under there and at the back, which it doesn't at the moment, I'm not going to raise the rear end. Instead, I'm going to lower the front end. Now I can do that nicely and easily a few ways. I can either move the shock absorber along the shock tower, or I can remove some of the preloading clips on the shock absorbers at the front. Now either way, whatever I do is going to affect the performance on the front. So I think to begin with, I'm going to relocate the shock absorber one hole along. So we've got this tool again from my MST drift car. I really hope it makes a difference. That's right, everything's just falling off the table. That's wonderful. Right, so after much trial and error, in the end, what I've done is I've moved the front shock absorbers over one space from there to there. And I've removed the big, chunky spaces from the front shock absorbers. I put some half-size ones in. And we're just about level, or it looks that way anyway. So even though we're off the scale, I'm going to see roughly that's about there. Oh, I can't get to there. So it's running just slightly higher at the back than it is at the front. So I think I'm going to settle for that for now. and the front suspension is a little bit too soft. So I'm going to take it out for the next race meeting, and I'll find if it's just a bit too much oversteer or if I'm bottoming out at the front. All I'm going to do is switch out these small spaces for these large spaces, and then just run a bit more ground clearance at the front end. But otherwise, I think we're done for today. So we've got the rear suspension sorted, we've got the ride height sorted, we've got the camber sorted, and a fresh pinion on there as well. So what do we think of the tool? Well, this thing is cheap, super duper cheap. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to use, I won't lie to you, but this is super cheap. This was like £5.69 or something off eBay. Of course, I'll put a link in the description. And it has definitely been helpful, though. There's no other way, apart from by spending £100 on an RC car station, how I would be able to measure negative camber or positive camber. Now, there is probably a way I could use this to measure toe in as well, and I'm pretty sure the toe in on the rear of this car is out. It looks to me there's a bit more toe in on that tyre than there's on that tyre. However, I could be wrong. So I'll try and measure that in the future. I'll probably use my hobby mat, which is packed away at the moment. We're about to move house, and probably line it up alongside it, and then use this kind of sideways. But you know, we'll try that in the future. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you next time.